Hi, this is the voice, Michael Chavello. You're listening to the Premium Oddscast, hosted by leading MMA odds maker Nick Kalikas, fight scientist and author of Fightnomics, Reed Kuhn, and MMA journalist Brian Hemminger. The absolute best UFC betting info, picks, statistics, and analysis from the most respected authority in mixed martial arts betting, MMAoddsbreaker.com.
Welcome to the Premium Oddscast, presented by 5 Dimes. I'm Brian Hemminger, joined today by leading mixed martial arts line setter Nick Kalikas to break down this Saturday's UFC Fight Night 46 event, which takes place in Dublin, Ireland. If you're unfamiliar with our format, myself and Nick will be breaking down the fight card from top to bottom, providing extensive analysis and a pick for each fight after doing our film study for the event. Then, fight scientist Reed Kuhn will step in and offer his expansive numerical insight on all bouts with sufficient data. Today, Reed will be able to contribute on the final 3 bouts of the card. Now, also pay attention to our MMA Oddsbreaker staff picks article, where we'll have our final picks in case we make any changes following the weigh-ins. Briefly looking back at our last event, UFC 175 and the Ultimate Fighter 19 finale combined, we went 3-2 overall with our bets to profit 2.76 units. Now, back to the present. UFC Fight Night 46 features a 10-fight card in total and will be aired on UFC Fight Pass this Saturday. Let's dive right in. Now, kicking off the preliminary card, we have a flyweight contest featuring the debuting Patrick Holohan, who is 9-0-1 overall, taking on Josh Sampo, who is 11-3. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how's the public shifted things so far?
I opened Sampo minus 260, the comeback on Holohan plus 180. Looking over at 5dimes.eu. That's what we're going to use for all of the lines on this podcast. Right now, Sampo is minus 195, Holohan's plus 160. A little side note, there was some European lines out there which had it closer to a pick'em fight, so I was expecting to get some dog action on this fight and the line to drop a little bit. But as far as the matchup goes, I really do think that it's Sampo's fight to win or lose. I know he's going kind of traveling overseas, fighting on in enemy territory, and it's going to be definitely a stern test because Holohan's a pretty talented fighter. But I think Sampo has a significant edge when it comes to how they match up in this fight. I'll start off with Holohan though first. He was a tough 18 participant, lost by majority decision in the elimination round to Josh Hill. So he got put out early in that fight, but he displayed some decent skill for sure. The guy's more of a very lanky, tall guy for 125. He's 5'10". So he's got the length on the ground or on the feet that can be tricky to deal with for sure. But he's more of a submission-based fighter. I mean, he likes to fight on the ground, on top or bottom. He's comfortable either way. He's actually too comfortable off his back, and I think that's what's going to come into play here against Sampo. But that being said, Holohan's stand-up game is definitely improving on the feet. He's not very fun to watch because he's a little bit slow and predictable with the striking, but he's got a little bit of power, and again, that length could be a little bit tricky to deal with. But Sampo, on the other hand, he's a little bit more of the stocky, more compact type of fighter. He's going to be a little bit stronger, I think, physically stronger in this fight. He has more of the wrestling base. So he should have that advantage in this fight. His striking's not bad either. He's got pretty good hands. He mixes things up well. He's got some power to go along with it. And on the ground, I think that's where he can probably control things. Again, Holohan is a little bit too comfortable fighting off his back, and I think Sampo's going to probably be able to get him on the ground, work some ground and pound, work some positional control. He's got decent jiu-jitsu in his own right, and he's never been submitted. So I think for Holohan to win this fight, he's going to have to submit Sampo, and I think Sampo's submission defense overall is decent enough to survive anything that Holohan throws up. So it should be competitive, back and forth scrap with a lot of this fight. I think it is going to take place on the ground. But I do give the slight edge to Sampo in this fight because I think he's going to get the W here.
And I'm actually going to not just give a slight edge to Sampo. I think he's got a pretty significant edge here. Looking at this fight, Holohan's biggest kryptonite has been his defensive wrestling. While he is a very, very competent ground fighter, he is not nearly as good when he's off his back, although he does have a dangerous guard. The problem here is, unlike in the fight to get into the Ultimate Fighter Season 18, Holohan is fighting a guy that's not just going to lay and pray him. Josh Sampo is an extremely competent wrestler, top control guy with ground and pound and with submissions. He will pass guard. He's very aggressive from top control, and he will look for the finish. So he's going to be much more dangerous if and almost certainly when he gets the takedown. Now, Holohan on the feet, He doesn't really offer that much in terms of punches, but his kicks are pretty dangerous. He throws out a wide variety of them. But the problem here is that's going to make him susceptible to the takedown from Sampo. And Sampo also on the feet, while he doesn't offer a whole lot of danger, he does have some pretty good power to the body. And Holohan being 5'10" is going to actually be a pretty big target at that midsection. And my problem here, of course, is just on the canvas. I don't think Holohan's defensive wrestling has improved enough, and I really don't think that he's going to be able to submit Sampo off of his back. So barring some really crazy judging shenanigans, I think that Sampo is going to be riding out most of this fight from top position, and if he doesn't get the finish, he will probably win a decision. So my pick is definitely going to be Josh Sampo. Moving all the way up to the light heavyweight division, we have a battle between Cody Donovan, who is 8-4 overall, taking on Nikita Krylov, who is 16-4. Now, Nick, what's the MMA odds maker's perspective on this one?
I opened Krylov minus 140, the comeback on Donovan, even money. The line on Krylov has since gotten a little bit better out there. It's minus 120, the comeback on Donovan is minus 110. So a little bit more support coming in on the grappling-based fighter Donovan. He has shown a decent stand-up. I guess he's showing signs of stand-up, I should say. He hasn't looked that great in the UFC at all. Neither one of these guys really. So it's kind of a battle of who doesn't get cut here. So the winner is probably going to save his job and the loser is going to get cut. But as far as how they match up, I mean, Donovan definitely wants to take this fight to the ground. As far as stand-up goes, Krylov has a significant advantage over Donovan on the feet. He's got knockout power. He's got better pure kickboxing abilities for sure. And Donovan, even though he has shown at least signs of a threat on the feet because he has a little bit of power and he tries to be a little aggressive, his chin is just terrible. So Krylov has a more solid chin. I think if it stays standing, he should be able to do what he does best to knock out Donovan. Now on the ground though, that's where Krylov has to definitely worry. He has some submissions offensively in his own right, but his submission he's pretty bad. And I think Donovan might be able to get top position. And if he does, we could see a typical arm triangle type of choke or something like that Krylov is very susceptible to. So Donovan needs to get this fight down. But I think overall Krylov knows that. He realizes what he has to do. He realizes that his job's on the line. Both these guys do. They're going to have definitely some more incentive coming into this fight, no doubt about it. They're going to be more motivated than they usually are, I'm sure. But that being said, I think that Krylov is going to be the smarter fighter here. He's going to be able to stuff the takedowns, keep it upright, and I think he's going to be able to land that knockout blow and put Donovan out. But this is a fight I've been bouncing back and forth on myself, so could change after weigh-ins. But make sure you guys stay posted to the MMAOddsbreaker.com page. We have our staff picks, so my final pick will be there. But right now, I am leaning towards Krylov to get the knockout.
And I'm going to disagree here. I really think that Cody Donovan is the better overall mixed martial artist. If it stays standing, Krylov probably has a better chance of winning. He does have that karate background. He's capable of throwing a few more diverse strikes than Donovan has, as evidenced by his head kick that he scored against Walt Harris. But overall, I think Donovan will probably be able to hold his own in the boxing department. And then on the ground, Donovan is at a huge advantage in my opinion. He has better wrestling. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He's definitely got the better submissions, and Krylov is very sloppy on the ground and leaves openings, and as evidenced in his last fight, very prone to getting submitted against people that know what they're doing. And Donovan definitely does know what he's doing. The thing that I'm scared about, of course, is that Donovan's chin is terrible, and if Krylov cracks him like he did in the Walt Harris fight, he's going to finish him. Donovan has been knocked out multiple times in the UFC already, and it could happen again if he gets too cute on the feet. But I think he's going to be smart here. Both these guys are backs against the wall, and I think Donovan will come in with a smart game plan. And my pick is Cody Donovan to take this to the ground and either win a decision or most likely get a stoppage. So moving on, we have a middleweight contest featuring Thor Trang, who is 16-5-1 overall, taking on Trevor Smith, who is 11-5. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how's the public shifted things so far?
Trong minus 260, the comeback on Smith plus 180, and some dog action coming in on Smith early on. Trong is all the way down to minus 180. The comeback on Smith is plus 150. This is an interesting matchup, man. And I'll tell you what, I don't have confidence in either one of these guys, to be honest with you. To typically Smith doesn't get a whole lot of support, although we've seen some sharp action coming in on him, at the sports books, in his recent, fights. But that being said, from the overall casual fan and from the casual bettors out there, Smith doesn't get that much support at all. So it's a little bit surprising that he is getting some early support here. And I think it's because of the matchup. I mean, both these guys have suspect chins. Trong has managed to, hang on and be a little bit tougher, I think in most cases, and hang on, but he has been rocked. I mean, definitely in his fights, and it is a big concern, but Smith's chin's even worse. I mean, that's a scary thing. I mean, it doesn't take much to catch Smith on the chin and knock him out. Other than that, as far as cardio goes, I think Trong, both of these guys tend to slow down a little bit, but Trong does have, the better cardio for sure. Smith, that's always been, one of his worst points, really, not good in the cardio aspect of his game at all. So always a concern when you're betting Smith. Will he fade? Will he look bad in round 2 if he hangs on that long? But as far as the skill set for Smith goes, I mean, he does have some underrated power on the feet, no doubt about it. When he gets aggressive, he can be a little bit effective with that power. But overall, standing up, I mean, he's not that much of a threat. And I think Trong is the better overall fighter. I think Trong has more technical abilities on the feet. On the ground, wrestling's going to be interesting. I think it's going to go back and forth a little bit with the scrambling, and we could see either fighter get top position. Smith is a more dangerous, capable fighter, I think, of hitting that sub and ending things quicker than Trong. But I think Trong can survive in most cases. He's got some good scrambling ability. Even if he gets put on his back, he's got some good reversals and manages to get back up to his feet in most cases. So this should be a competitive type of battle. That's why, again, I do see why people were betting the dog in this spot. But still, I don't have much confidence in Smith. I don't have much confidence in Trong, but I am going to pick Trong to get the W here. I think he has been putting in some work. Both these guys definitely have, but I think Trong, it's his fight to basically win or lose. He has to show up here, and he's got the capabilities of definitely getting the win if he fights smart. So you got to lean slightly towards him. But as far as betting goes, I think it is a dog or pass situation here, no doubt about it, but one that we're probably going to pass on for sure.
And I'm in relative agreement. I just think that neither of these guys are very good fighters overall. They're really not UFC caliber, although if I had to pick one to stick around, it would probably be Trong. I just think he's a little bit more well-rounded. He's got a little bit more potential than, of course, being from Sweden, he brings in a little bit more of a niche market. Trevor Smith is just more a guy that's there. He's tough normally, pretty scrappy, not much of a striker on the feet. He's better on the ground than anything, although he doesn't have very good takedowns. So it's a really weird position for him to be in overall. Trong, he's not the greatest either. He's a little slow, has a little bit of power, has a decent chin, and the biggest thing that Trong has going for him is that he actually scrambles pretty well. He can get out of bad positions. He can usually wind up on top if he's rolling around on the ground. Yeah, that just makes this fight very tricky, because if Smith wants to take it to the ground, I think Trong will be able to hold his own there. And on the feet, neither of these guys are world beaters, but I do think Trong will be a little bit more aggressive and push the pace a little bit. Man, and Smith looked so bad in his last fight. He got absolutely blistered by Talaslitis. So who knows? Maybe Trong could do the same thing, although I really don't think he has a ton of power. It's just a weird fight. It really is. I'm going to lean towards Trong, but I'm not confident whatsoever. And maybe fighting a little closer to home will be to Trong's advantage as well. So my pick's going to be toward Trong. Sticking with the 185-pound division, we have a pair of Ultimate Fighter 19 fighters in Cathal Pendred, who is 13-2 overall, taking on Mike King, who is 5-0. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Pendred opens up minus 215. The comeback on King plus 165. Another spot where the dog is getting some love. King is down to plus 145. The favorite Pendred is now minus 175. And again, another spot where I actually agree with the early movement coming in here, because I do think it's a dog or pass situation. This is going to be a competitive fight. I mean, both these guys obviously are from the Ultimate Fighter 19. Both these guys were very competitive against champion Eddie Gordon. So, you got to give them credit for that. I mean, we could easily see either one of these guys fighting in that championship slot for the middleweights here. Now, first of all, we got to mention that Pendred's a natural 170. I mean, I know he's a big guy for 170, but still, that's the weight class he should be in. And he was fighting at 185. Now, King, 185 is his proper weight class. He's even been heavier before in the past with some of those fights. So I do think that King's going to be the physically stronger fighter, but Pendred didn't look weak at 185, no doubt about that. But still, I do give some physical advantages. He's going to have the height, not the pure reach. I think Pendred's got him by an actual inch of pure reach, but I still think the size and strength is going to go slightly to King in his favor. Now, as far as these guys match up, skill set for skill set, it's going to be pretty close because both these guys are similar type of fighters. They both like to grind you out. Pendred, I think, is a little bit more busy on the feet. He's a little bit more active with the strikes. He throws more of a variety of techniques. King is a little bit more patient on the feet. He tries to look for an opening, but once he does find that opening, he explodes and has some pretty good power to go along with it too. He can be dangerous at times. So this is going to be really who pushes the pace, who controls the action, in the octagon. And I think we could see another back and forth type battle. I do think that King should get top position more times than not if this fight does go to the ground because has a slightly better wrestling advantage. But as far as cardio goes, Pendred seems to have a little bit better cardio. And looking back, even before the Ultimate Fighter, if you look at his fights throughout his career, man, Pendred, one thing that he's got going over most fighters is heart and his cardio and his conditioning. I mean, he trains very hard, and you could tell. I mean, the guy can usually go 5 rounds no problem. I mean, that's the kind of fighter he is. I think he can go a full 5 strong. Now, King does tend to fade as the fight goes on. I think his cardio is going to be a little bit better than what we've seen on the show, but he does tend to slow down a little bit more than Pendred. So Pendred's heart and cardio might carry him in this fight enough to steal a very competitive, controversial type of decision. But pick for pick, I think you got to go with King here. I think he is slightly better at this point. This is his natural weight class, and I think just his ability to be a little bit more physical than Pendred, push the pace a little bit more, is going to probably get him the rightful nod on the judges' scorecards. Now, will they score it that way? I'm not sure, but it is a dog or pass situation here.
Yeah, this is a tricky fight. I do think that King's size is going to be a really big factor into it, but another thing that you absolutely have to take into account is that Pendred is Irish, fighting in Ireland. He's going to have a huge crowd advantage. They're going to be cheering every little thing he does, booing everything King does, and that could sway the judges. It's not out of the realm of possibility. Now, King is going to have a decent wrestling advantage. He scrambles pretty well. Both guys are pretty sloppy, but I think the size and wrestling is going to be very important for King pulling out this fight. Pendred does have some decent wrestling in his own right. He times takedowns well when fighters are moving forward really sloppily and aggressively and leave openings, and King does do that when he strikes. He actually leaves a pretty big openings overall when he's moving forward trying to land big bombs. And he could get put on his back, although he scrambles back up pretty well, and then when he does tough takedowns, he can usually scramble to top position. So I would definitely give King the advantage on the ground. Pendred probably has a technical striking advantage, but he's not a very good striker either, in my opinion. He leaves huge openings in his defense. He brawls a little bit too much, and I don't think he has a very good chin. Neither of these guys have great chins, but I think King is a little tougher, and I think King has a little bit more power. So he could definitely hurt Pendred, and then the fact that he is bigger also helps him out here. I would not put it past King using his wrestling and winning 2 out of 3 rounds and then losing a controversial decision to Pendred. But I'm going to go with my gut here and pick Mike King, although I don't have a lot of confidence in it, and I'm not quite sure it's worthy of a bet just because he's the underdog right now, just because there's so many variables here with these guys making their UFC debuts. Now, moving on, we have dropping down to the flyweight division with Neil Seery, who is 13-10 overall, taking on Phil Harris, who is 22-12 with 1 no contest. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how's the public shifted things so far?
I opened Seery minus 140, the comeback even money on Harris over 5 dimes right now. It's minus 175 for Seery. The comeback on Harris is plus 145. So some support coming in on Seery. Man, I'll tell you what, I'm glad that the UFC brought this guy back. Seery I'm talking about, because his fight with Pickett was tremendous. And that's just the kind of warrior, Seery's been throughout his whole career. I mean, the guy keeps on improving his overall game. And he's a threat to deal with for sure, especially on the feet. Harris, he got the call back. He was getting ready for a Cage Warriors fight that didn't go through. The UFC gave him another opportunity, here against Seery, which is somebody that he has beat in the past. Bama 3, those guys fought, to a competitive decision that Harris actually, got the nod in. Now, Seery admitted himself that he wasn't himself before that fight. He had some personal issues that, kind of made things a little bit difficult to train and to deal with the situation. I know there's some interviews out there that you guys can check out what I'm talking about if you search around, look around a little bit too. But I believe some of that, honestly. I think that this is a fight that was made for Siri to kind of get that loss back. In most people's eyes, I think Siri does have the advantage overall. He's got decent takedown defense, and I think that's what Harris has to do here. I think Harris has to work his grappling game, his wrestling, his takedowns, and his ground game in general to dictate where the fight goes and to kind of grind out a decision when he gets Siri. But I think since their first meeting, honestly, Siri's elevated his game to a whole new level, and I think that it's a winnable fight for Siri. I think he's going to have a little bit more confidence. He knows he performed well against Pickett. Pickett's definitely a harder fight than Harris in that spot, so I think he's going to have some confidence. I know he knows that he has the ability to hurt Harris on the feet. He's by far the better striker here. Even though Harris has a little bit of power, Siri's still more of the sniper of the two. I mean, he goes to the body nasty. He just mixes things up really well. And then on the ground, like I said, he's not easy to get there, and that's kind of what Harris's overall game is. He's more of a ground grappler, grinder type of guy, so he's going to need to do that. And I think Siri's going to defend enough in this fight to be able to keep it standing and probably finish Harris. If he doesn't, I think you should outpoint him at least. So I am going to lean towards Siri, but he has to defend the takedowns well to get this fight.
Yeah, this fight's another tricky one just because both guys clearly have advantages. Neil Siri is hands down the better striker. If this fight stays standing, Phil Harris is in for a world of hurt. And yeah, they fought before, but I think these guys are a little bit different fighters since then. And man, honestly, if Siri keeps this standing, it's going to be a repeat of the Phil Harris versus John Lineker fight, where Harris just got teed off on, and then he got brutalized with some nasty shots to the body. And those are one of Siri's specialties. So I can really see Siri teeing off on Phil Harris on the feet if this fight stays standing for extended periods of time. Now, Siri is going to have to be careful because if he is too aggressive, leaves a few openings, Harris will try to time something and then make him pay for his aggression with some takedowns. And that, of course, is the weakness in Siri's game. He's almost exclusively a stand-up fighter, does not have a lot of defensive wrestling, does not have a lot of really good game off of his back, and isn't amazing at getting back to his feet either, although overall his defensive groundwork is okay. He doesn't take a lot of damage, doesn't get submitted very easily. So I really think that it's going to be a battle of wills. Is Neil Siri going to be able to keep this fight standing and go to town on Phil Harris, or is Phil Harris going to be able to time Siri's aggression and work this fight into his favor with clinch and takedowns? Because whoever is able to implement their will get their game plan going is going to win this fight. And honestly, even though Siri's a little bit older, I think he's a much more dangerous fighter. The threat of the finish is clearly from Neil Siri because he wasn't able to get submitted by Brad Pickett. I definitely don't think he gets submitted by Phil Harris. So I think just the danger of the knockout and the fact that Phil Harris has not looked good in his UFC career at all pretty much makes me go with Neil Siri here. I think that he bounces back and looks really strong. So I'm going to pick Neil Siri. Now moving back up to the light heavyweight division, we have Ilir Latifi, who is 9-3 overall with 1 no contest, taking on UFC newcomer Chris Dempsey. Now Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Latifi opens minus 245, the comeback on Dempsey plus 175. And the dog has gotten some love here as well. Latifi's minus 195, Dempsey is now plus 160. And you know what? This is a spot that I do disagree on. I mean, starting off first, I know that this fight is at 205. Dempsey he has been fighting at 185. He's a pretty big guy for middleweight, no doubt about it, so he shouldn't be undersized. In fact, he's going to be a little bit taller than Latifi here. And he's a pretty strong guy, so I don't think it's going to be a horrible weight for him, but he is more of a 185er, and he's fighting Latifi, which is at 205. So we have to get that out of the way first. As far as pure reach goes, believe it or not, Latifi, even though he is a few inches shorter, he's going to have 4 inches of actual reach there. So I think that's going to come to some advantages for Latifi on the feet. I think he's going to be able to land a little bit more on Dempsey. I do think that Latifi has better pure striking ability. He's faster. I think he can land a little bit more accurately and more often on Dempsey. Dempsey's basically a wrestling-based fighter. I mean, he's coming in as a late replacement for Tom Lawler. So Latifi's prepared for a wrestling-based type of fighter anyway in Lawler, so it's not going to be much of a change in game plan here. Dempsey does have a well-rounded skill set overall, but his wrestling and ground attack definitely seems to be his best attribute. On the feet, he has some boxing, tends to be a little technical at times, but he's just a little bit slow and predictable. So, I don't see him having too much success there. He does have some power though. So again, let's see if he has to be cautious there. But I think Dempsey has, at least on footage, displayed decent wrestling overall, but he has been put on his back. So I think Latifi's wrestling's decent enough to give Dempsey some fits here. I think Latifi could probably manage to get top position on the ground, drop some ground and pound, control most of it. And on the feet again, Latifi does have some advantages there as well. So I think wherever this fight takes place, you got to lean towards Latifi. He's a little bit more proven at this point. He's fought better competition. He had a full training camp compared to Dempsey as well. This is more of his natural weight class. There's a lot of advantages here for Latifi. Now that being said, Latifi's not a very good fighter. I mean, he's not a great fighter by any means. He's just solid, I think. He's a guy at 205 that continues to improve his overall game. I mean, training with Gustafsson and crew over in Sweden, of course, you got to kind of expect that. He's getting a little bit more confidence, but by any means, he's not a great fighter. He's just very solid, I think, in my opinion. And he can improve, though, a little bit more from this point on. But that being said, he is better than Dempsey. So I am going to lean with Latifi. I think it's his fight to win or lose.
Yeah, and I'm in complete agreement here. I think Dempsey's getting this shot a little too early, especially in a headlining of a prelim fight type of card, type of fight. So, man, I really think that Ilir Latifi is got the advantage just about everywhere here. I mean, the only place that Dempsey might be better is in terms of pure wrestling, and even there, I think Latifi will be able to hold his own. If you've seen any videos of Latifi lifting weights or anything, you have to know that while this guy isn't very tall at light heavyweight, he might be one of the strongest light heavyweights in the entire UFC roster. The guy is just a little pit bull. He's just full of extreme strength, and he uses that very well when he gets the fight up close and personal. So if this fight gets into the clinch, if this fight goes to the ground, I really see Latifi bullying Dempsey, even though Dempsey does have the wrestling background and he's got some pretty decent power. Latifi, he's not the greatest striker, but he has timely aggression, and he uses it pretty well to get inside and then make the fight interesting, where, of course, he's earned his sledgehammer nickname once he gets the fight up close. So I think Dempsey's going to have some serious problems here, because he's not going to be able to stay outside because Latifi is going to have the reach advantage, and if he tries to take it to the ground, unless he can take Latifi down and keep him down, then I think he's going to have some serious problems. And then the fact that Latifi is fighting at a full training camp while Dempsey is coming in as a short notice replacement, I think gives a huge advantage to Latifi. So I really see Latifi controlling this fight and probably getting a submission, because Dempsey, while he is on an 8-fight winning streak, I think he has had a little bit of trouble with submissions in the past, and Latifi is definitely the best submission fighter he's fought yet. So I think Latifi continues his little resurgence here, and my pick is Ilir Latifi. Now, kicking off the main card, we have a lightweight battle between Norman Park, who is 22-1 overall, taking on the returning UFC fighter Naoyuki Kitani, who is 33-10-7. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Well, I opened Park minus 315, the comeback on Kitani plus 235. Line has increased a little bit. Park is now minus 325, the comeback on Kitani plus 250. So not a lot of movement, but a little bit more support coming in on Park, and I'm sure that's mostly parlay action on Park as well. This is a good fight. Probably a lot more competitive and better than people realize. Kitani is one of these veterans that have been on the scene for a long time, has fought quality competition throughout his career, and has done nothing but continue to improve his overall skill set. I mean, he's primarily a grappling-based fighter, likes to look for the takedowns, likes to use his jiu-jitsu, his control, some ground and pound. He's pretty aggressive in pursuit of the takedowns and grappling. So, he's not bad on the feet. He's definitely capable, but he will get, beat if he does keep this fight standing, and he can't take Park to the ground. Park overall, I think he's a talented fighter. I mean, since he moved camps and has been training with Alliance, I mean, he's looked tremendous. I mean, you could definitely see his wrestling improve. He's always had a decent wrestling base, but his stand-up, his boxing's improved, his fight IQ's improved. I think his takedown defense, his submission defense overall, I mean, he's just a better fighter now, and he's getting to prove that he belongs in the UFC and that he can compete with some of the best in the division. So this is in Ireland. This is kind of, again, in Park's backyard in a way, so he's going to have a lot of motivation, a lot of fans fans supporting him and cheering for him. So it's really his fight to win or lose. I think he's more than capable of maintaining this fight upright, and if he does, he should at least outpoint Katani, maybe even get a stoppage. I know Park's not a crazy knockout puncher, but if he lands enough and does enough damage, you never know here. But he does have to be very wary of Katani's submission game and his ground game in general. He's got underrated wrestling, takedown ability, and definitely submission ability. So if Katani does get it to the ground successfully and often, I think he's going to actually pull off the upset here. But that being said, more times than not, again, this Park's fight to win or lose. I think his takedown defense has improved enough to keep this upright, and I think he will outbox Katani overall on the feet. So it's Park's fight to win or lose, so I'm going to lean Park.
And I'm in agreement. I do think that Katani is a bit underrated, and he's been on a nice little run to earn this return to the UFC, but I think it's a tough matchup for him overall. Big age difference, Katani being 32 as a lightweight, which is, once you start hitting that age at those 155 pounds and lower, it gets a little tougher. And compared to Park, who's 27 and on the rise, looking real good, Park is going to be fighting very close to home, being from Northern Ireland, so a lot of support. I think he'll feed off of that, and it could definitely factor into the decision. And I think, honestly, the thing that's the biggest difference in terms of this fight is Park's going to be a little bit bigger. I think Park's definitely going to be the better stand-up fighter. He's not a terrific stand-up fighter by any means, but he is better than Katani. Katani has a few kicks. He's decent on the feet, but Park's more aggressive. Park has better boxing. And I think the fact that Park will be forcing Katani to fight on his heels will definitely be to his advantage in the stand-up. Now, on the ground, Katani is the better submission fighter, and he is pretty slick. He's got that catch wrestling base, so he goes for a lot of heel hooks, a lot of, stuff that people aren't really used to, but that's not quite as effective anymore these days unless you're Huzamar Palhares or Marcin Held. So I really don't see him catching Park with anything crazy, and if this fight does go to the ground, I actually think it'll be Park initiating some takedowns and potentially getting on top. I do think he is a slightly better overall wrestler than Katani. So I really see Park having the advantages just about everywhere, and probably in the worst case winning a decision, most likely winning a decision. So my pick is Norman Park. Now dropping down to the flyweight division, we have former top bantamweight contender Brad Pickett, who is 25-8 overall, taking on top flyweight contender Ian McCall, who is 12-4-1 overall. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how's the public shifted things so far?
I opened McCall minus 140 to come back on Pickett, even money. Another very competitive matchup here on this card. I mean, from top to bottom, we're going to see some very close fights and some very exciting fights, I think, back and forth. And this is another one. I mean, I do give some advantages to McCall. I should say the current line right now is minus 165 his way. The comeback on Pickett's plus 135. So more support has come in on McCall. You know what, before I did my research on this fight, I kind of leaned towards McCall as well. I thought, McCall's probably a bad matchup for Pickett. I mean, they have a lot of similarities. They both have good wrestling. They both have good striking. They're well-rounded fighters. They got submission game to go along with it. So this is a very competitive matchup on paper. This is a very competitive matchup if you look at stylistically how they compare to each other. But Pickett does have some advantages in this fight. I mean, age is not one of them. He is going to be, I believe, 5 years older, coming into this fight. Pickett is going to have the reach advantage though. He's going to have 4 inches of pure reach. So on the feet, which this fight should play out more times than not standing up, he is going to have a little bit of advantage in that area. And both these guys do have good boxing, good kickboxing overall. They, move fairly well. McCall's going to have a slight speed advantage. But I think that's probably about it. I think Pickett can probably pull off this fight, and a lot of people, especially with the support, everybody kind of counting Pickett out. It makes me think that more people are wrong than I thought about this fight. I really think that it does stay up on the feet. I think Pickett has a little bit more punching power. He's going to be, kind of his home away from home in Ireland here. He'll be a little bit more motivated. This is only his second fight at 125, so I think he's got a point to prove because his performance against Syria was kind of a letdown in most cases. He was a huge favorite and barely won that fight. So I think this is a good spot for him. I think he can get a lot of that respect he might have lost even with that W back. So this is an important fight, and I think McCall's been out for so long, we might see a little bit of rust on him as well. So I've been going back and forth. Honestly, it is going to be a pickup type fight again. I originally liked McCall, but I'm actually leaning more towards Pickett here in this spot now. So I'm going to go with my gut and say that the underdog comes through in Pickett.
And I'm going to come in on the other side. I really think the favorite's going to come through here. The biggest advantage for McCall, obviously, is that he's only 30 years old compared to Pickett's 35. Now, maybe in pure skill, maybe a year or two ago, I would say that Pickett was the better fighter because he is a little bit bigger, he has a little bit more technical striking, but the problem for me is that Pickett is getting older, and it's starting to show. You really saw it in that Neil Seery fight where he took a lot of damage and had to resort to getting a lot of takedowns to win that fight. So I really think that takedowns won't save him here against Ian McCall because McCall is the better wrestler. And if McCall really wants to get the takedown and actually tries to get it to the canvas, I think he can. He should have the wrestling advantage, and I think once Ian McCall is in top position, he's, very scary. In terms of on the feet, I think it'll be relatively even, although the technical advantages do go to Pickett. But I think McCall has the better chin. Clearly, Brad Pickett has been hurt repeatedly, especially lately in fights. So that is a huge concern. I think his chin is really starting to deteriorate. And, if these guys are trading blow for blow, even though Ian McCall doesn't have a ton of knockout power, he does have some decent power. And it could be enough to hurt Pickett and set up takedown attempts or just win rounds. So, I really think that if these guys get into a brawl, which McCall probably wouldn't mind, then I think it's to McCall's advantage. And if it goes to the canvas, I think it's to McCall's advantage. So I'm going with the youth, and my only real concern here is that McCall has been out for a significant amount of time ever since the Joseph Benavidez fight, nursing some injuries. So ring rust could be a factor here, especially going overseas in his first fight back. But I think this is Ian McCall's fight to lose. So I'm going to pick McCall. Now, what do the numbers tell us for this one, Reed?
Well, out of the last three fights on this card, this one really is the closest matchup, and the odds reflect that. And I think they are accurate. I think most people looked at this, and we know McCall from his fights with Johnson. He was very competitive, almost won a title, but he's just not there. And he dropped a few. He looked decent in his last fight, but again, that was almost a year ago. And I'm looking down the line here, and really the biggest advantage that he has is defensively. He's got pretty good strike avoidance relative to Pickett, who tends to blast forward a little bit, and he does have 5 years youth advantage. But I will not beat around the bush. McCall has had drug issues in the past, and some of that youth advantage goes away because the healthy brain is what drives the youth advantage, and he might not have that. He's had some issues outside of the cage, especially over the last couple of years, and so that's a big red flag for him. Now, statistically, in terms of performance metrics, Pickett has also been in the cage with bigger fighters for a while. A lot of these numbers are based on that. He's down in a smaller weight class where he should be able to be more powerful. He's got a 4-inch reach advantage, and despite being much older and into that risk period pushing 36, his performance metrics are a little bit better, and actually his chin rating is slightly better than McCall's. McCall's been dropped twice, Pickett 4 times, but on a punch-for-punch basis, McCall has slightly better rating. So there's a lot of very small edges to Pickett. And again, I have to remember that the strength of schedule on Pickett was against bigger fighters, bigger weight class, and he's going to be very motivated in this fight. So I just think he's maybe the more dangerous guy here. And he actually operates at a faster pace than McCall. So when I'm looking for ingredients for an upset, I do see some evidence here. And the line is, close enough where you can pick it honestly, just pick the fight honestly. And I'm leaning towards Pickett because of the plus value. But either way, this will probably be the fastest paced striking that we see on the main card, which is also good for a bonus.
All right. Thanks, Reed. Now moving back up to the welterweight division, we have the co-main event of the evening featuring Gunnar Nelson, who is 12-0-1 overall, taking on Zach Cummings, who is 17-3. Now, Nick, what's the MMA odds maker's perspective on this one?
I opened Nelson minus 505. The comeback on Cummings was plus 335. And since that time, line actually dropped a little bit. Nelson's minus 450. The comeback on Cummings right now is plus 330. So the line basically just got a little bit tighter, but initial action did come in on the underdog Cummings here. And you know what? From a sportsbook perspective, I think that's a good spot to be in. I know Cummings is a very solid fighter, very well-rounded skill set. His last W against Cabral was a very good win for him. I think he deserved to win that W. He lost the first round, but showed more heart, showed better conditioning, showed better fight IQ, and ended up getting the W there. Nelson's a very similar fighter in the aspects of pure grappling. I mean, Nelson is ground whiz, and that's what he had to deal with in his last fight for Cummings too. So he survived that aspect of the game and managed to get the W here. But what is different from Nelson and Cabral, it's really obvious, honestly. Nelson's cardio is a lot better. And not just that, I think Nelson could probably keep things on the feet if he wants to. And on the feet, he's going to have actually a bigger advantage, even though he's more known for his grappling. I mean, we've seen the karate style of Nelson be very effective. He keeps on looking better and better throughout his career as he goes forward. So I think he's got a lot of confidence. He's got some underrated knockout power in his kicks and his hands. And I think that even though Cummings is very well-rounded and he likes to push a high pace, I just think that Nelson's kind of going to pick him apart a little bit more on the feet, land the harder punches, land the harder kicks. And then if it does go to the floor, there is a level of difference here between Nelson and Cummings. Even though Cummings is a very solid grappler, he's got a good submission game in his own right. I mean, Nelson just trumps him in almost every area on the ground. So I got to lean with Nelson here. And I think, like I said, the overall dog action coming in on Cummings is probably pretty good for the sports books. It will get balanced out a little bit with Nelson parlays, I'm sure. But hopefully out there, most places will need Nelson to come through because I think he is going to be the side.
And I'm in complete agreement this time. I really think Gunnar Nelson is a spectacular combatant. The guy just has all the tools. You know, he's got the stand-up, which has really started to develop. He's got that karate background on the feet, very unique style. And then on the canvas, he is just incredible. Obviously, he has no problem, despite being slightly undersized at welterweight. The guy has competed in the Abu Dhabi open weight and defeated heavyweights like Jeff Monson. I mean, the guy is incredible. And I really think that, even though Zach Cummings is a little bit bigger and, he has formerly fought at light heavyweight and middleweight, that's really not a problem for Nelson, especially on the canvas. The guy is just so slick there, uses elbows very well on the ground. His submission game is world class. Absolutely. He's one of the best at 170 pounds. And I think he's going to be much quicker, and he's probably going to beat Cummings to the punch on the feet. So, wherever this fight goes, I think Nelson is going to have the advantage. One thing that you really have to point out is Cummings, he has relied a lot on either his offensive ground game to win fights or his conditioning, like in his last fight against Jan Cabral. And he's not going to have an advantage in either of those departments here. Nelson is going to be faster. He's going to be better conditioned. He's going to be a little meaner on the feet, and he's clearly the better ground fighter, by a landslide, even though Cummings is pretty talented. So I really don't see a lot of ways for Cummings to win this fight, so I'm going to pick Gunnar Nelson. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, I think they're in agreement here. Granted, the sample sizes are small, but Gunnar Nelson on the feet, you mentioned his black belt in karate. His accuracy is extremely high. He is very good with his power hand. And he almost doesn't even use a jab. He's clearly a power striker. He waits. But waiting is also the one bad metric that he has offensively. He tends to get out struck or just in terms of volume compared to his opponents. So his opponents come forward, they throw a lot more volume, but he's retreating. He has a much better defense, good avoidance, and very high precision. He's very much like Lyoto Machida in that respect. He's got the karate style. He hangs back, wide base. He's able to switch stance very fluidly, throw it with either hand. And if Zach Cummings, who is a high volume striker, he tends to come forward, that could work against him because he's going to be walking into a lot of strikes. And his own offensive striking is not very good, at least statistically. So granted, small sample, but no one has even dared to attempt a takedown against him to date. So obviously you wouldn't even call that perfect takedown defense. No one's even tried because I think they're too afraid of him on the ground. And he does have submission wins, a lot of them. And you're right, he probably has a better pedigree on the ground, even though Cummins has had success in that area. So there's just no real path to victory for Cummings unless somehow it stays standing and on volume alone, a Diego Sanchez clause comes into effect where he simply comes forward and eats a lot of punishment and survives the 3 rounds and wins on volume. But I don't see that. I think Gunnar Nelson is smart enough to not get caught in that trap, at least not for 2 out of 3 rounds. So he should be the more dangerous striker. Nelson is also the more dangerous grappler. So he should win this one way or the other.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Reed. Now this takes us to the main event of the evening, a 5-round featherweight contest featuring rising superstar, the notorious Conor McGregor, who is 14-2 overall, taking on Diego Brandao, who is 22-9. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how's the public shifted things so far?
I opened McGregor minus 385, the comeback on Brandao, plus 265. Support coming in on the favorite McGregor here. He's minus 425 now. The comeback on Brandao is plus 320. You know what, really, again, stylistically, it is kind of McGregor's fight to win or lose here. Brandao is definitely a very dangerous opponent, very capable opponent. I mean, the guy has good, devastating striking on the feet. He's got power. He trains from, at a good camp with Jackson and crew. On the ground, Brandao's a submission whiz in his own right. I mean, the guy has devastating submissions as well to go along with it. So he's one of these fighters that's dangerous no matter where the fight takes place. He's actually got some solid wrestling and overall decent takedown defense to go along with it. But cardio and conditioning has been a big flaw in Brandao's game. McGregor trumps him in that area for sure. He's got better conditioning, even though he's had a little bit of time off with the surgery and all the question marks surrounding him. I still think he's going to come in better ready physically for this bout than Brandao still. I mean, Brandao's kind of proven to all of us that no matter what, he doesn't really improve much in that area. So McGregor's going to have those conditioning benefits to go along with the fantastic striking that he's got. I mean, McGregor's one of the most dangerous strikers at 145. I know he's only a couple fights into the UFC, but overall, I think he's going to become one of the best strikers in the UFC period in any weight class. I mean, that's how good and technical and powerful this guy is on the feet. No doubt about it. He's starting to mix in some wrestling. His wrestling's getting a little bit better. His takedown defense is solid overall as well. So if he keeps the fight in his element, he's going to beat most guys at 145, no doubt about it. And I think in this particular spot, he's getting Brandao, which is a very winnable fight for him. I think Brandao's another one of his flaws, of course, is that chin. I mean, he's been tagged as the fight goes on, he fades a little bit more, so that chin becomes a little bit more suspect. But period, he's been knocked out 5 times. So you got to look at that, and against a striker like McGregor that can probably keep this fight standing, that's not a good sign. I mean, McGregor's going to have a huge reach advantage on the feet to go along with the better striking and decent takedown defense. So he is a high favorite for a reason. Brandao, very dangerous and solid opponent for him, and this will be somewhat of a test, but I think it's a test that McGregor can pass. So at the current line, minus 425, getting a little risky, but I think you got to go with that side.
Yeah, this one's a no-brainer. Conor McGregor is so much better than Diego Brandao in the stand-up department. It's scary. The guy is just able to do things that most other fighters can't do. He uses some really advanced striking techniques, fantastic setups for his strikes to be able to land those big shots that you don't see coming, because those are the ones that hurt the most. Those are the ones that score the knockouts most often. And he's able to set those up with ease. He uses a lot of feints. He uses a lot of really nice combinations, and his footwork is tremendous. So when this fight's in the stand-up portion, Diego Brandao is going to be in big, big trouble. And as Nick mentioned, the fact that Brandao has been on the receiving end of several knockouts, including his most recent fight against Poirier, that's very scary. I mean, he was even dropped in his UFC debut against Dennis Bermudez in that first round. So Conor McGregor hits extremely hard, so that's something you really got to keep an eye on. Now, on the ground, that's a little bit of a different story. Brandao should have a wrestling edge. He should have a jiu-jitsu edge. He has beaten taller, lankier fighters in the past and scored submissions over them, like Pablo Garza. But Conor McGregor is not Pablo Garza. McGregor has a fantastic reach and knows how to use it. I think it's going to be very difficult for Brandao to get inside on him because of McGregor's skill. And the fact that this is a 5-round fight is a nightmare for Diego Brandao. He's probably terrified of this fight going the full distance because McGregor is going to be better conditioned and McGregor's probably going to be dancing circles around him. So unless something fluky happens, like in McGregor's last fight where he tore his knee, I really see McGregor pulling this one out. So my pick is clearly going to be McGregor. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, I'm in full agreement. I think McGregor is definitely a big favorite here for a reason. Number one thing that jumps off the tail of the tape, he is allegedly at 72-inch reach versus Diego Brandao only at 64. If those numbers are true, that is an 8-inch reach differential. That is enormous, and that's enormous, especially for a featherweight class where these guys are already smaller and more compact. So I don't know if those are correct, but at least directionally they must be accurate. So there's probably going to be a big reach differential. Small sample size of McGregor here. He's only had 2 fights. But I think the fight against Holloway that maybe people were less impressed with, blowing an ACL early on, fighting through, still dominating. And I think people's perception of Max Holloway has also gone up since then. Holloway is a better fighter than I think people realize, just maybe because he doesn't look the part. So that win is a solid win for McGregor to beat Holloway and to do it injured. So statistically, his accuracy is very high. He does control the pace. Brandao, given that he's usually at a reach differential, cannot do that. He does have precision, but he tends to be getting outworked and pushed around. You mentioned his chin. He's been dropped twice, so his chin rating is actually slightly below average for their division. That's extremely dangerous against a precision striker like McGregor. And so how is Brandao going to win this fight? Well, he does have the better grappling credentials anyway, so he's got to get it down, but that means closing the distance on Conor McGregor. No one has taken him down, yet. So I don't see how Brandao does it. He would have to get inside. He would have to do it repeatedly. He would have to get McGregor on the ground, keep him there, and either get a submission or grind something out. And I don't think he's going to be able to do that. Certainly not in a main event for 5 rounds. So you got to go with McGregor here, and you got to be looking for him possibly landing the knockout strike. He is a southpaw. He might catch Brandao coming in because Brandao's going to have no other choice.
So that'll do it for our full event breakdown for UFC Fight Night 46. Part 2 of the Premium Oddscast featuring our premium bets will be out either late Friday morning or early Friday afternoon. So stay tuned for that if you're an MMAOddsbreaker.com premium member. If we have a free play to give out, make sure to follow @Premium Oddscast on Twitter because that's where we'll post them first. We can also notify you of our free bets via email if you prefer that method. Just send an email to picks@MMAOddsbreaker.com and we'll add you to our free bet mailing list. Also, feel free to like our Premium Oddscast Facebook page. We post articles, show announcements, and plenty of other information there so you can stay up to date on everything from us if you're interested. Special thanks to our sponsor, 5 Dimes. Good luck, everyone, and hopefully the betting gods are on your side this weekend.